Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm your host. Today we're going to discuss hedonism, which is the idea that pleasure is the ultimate good and pain is the ultimate bad. Now, hedonism can be viewed in two ways. The first way is the subjective experience of pleasure. In this case, we are our own moral authority. We do whatever we want, as long as it feels good. The second view is the objective measurement of pleasure. In this case, we look at the overall balance of pleasure to pain, and we try to maximize pleasure for everyone involved. So if I were to ask you, what is the best way to live? Your answer might be to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. But let's take this a step further. What does this actually mean? It means that if we want to understand how to live the best life possible, we need to understand what pleasure is and what pain is. Pleasure can be a momentary or a long-term experience, and pain can also be momentary or long-term. So let's look at this table that I've drawn up here. On the top, we have the words pleasure and pain. On the left side, we have the words momentary and long-term. So anything that is pleasurable in the moment, but not necessarily long-term, would be considered a momentary pleasure. So eating a donut, getting a massage, having sex, smoking weed, taking drugs, these are all things that feel pleasurable in the moment, but they don't necessarily make you feel good in the long run. But what about pain? Well, anything that is painful in the moment, but not necessarily long-term, would be considered a momentary pain. So getting a paper cut, stepping on a Lego, burning yourself, these are all things that hurt in the moment, but they don't necessarily cause you long-term pain. Now what about the long-term stuff? Well, anything that is pleasurable in the long run would be considered a long-term pleasure. So exercising, eating healthy, being with friends, helping others, these are all things that make you feel good in the long run, even though they may not feel that pleasurable in the moment. And what about pain? Well, anything that is painful in the long run would be considered a long-term pain. So drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, taking drugs, overeating, these are all things that hurt you in the long run, even though they may feel good in the moment. Okay, so now that we have this laid out, the next question is, how do we maximize pleasure and minimize pain? The answer, of course, is to engage in long-term pleasures and avoid long-term pains. But the problem is that people don't always do this. People often engage in short-term pleasures and short-term pains, and they do long-term harm to themselves. So the question then becomes, how do we get people to engage in long-term pleasures and avoid long-term pains? Well, that's where morals come in. Our moral duty is to engage in long-term pleasures and avoid long-term pains, both for ourselves and for others. So I have a challenge for you. Right now, think of someone in your life who is currently engaging in long-term pain. Maybe it's a friend or a family member, and think of the short-term pleasures that you could engage in that would cause them long-term pain. And then think about the long-term pleasures that you could encourage them to engage in that would help them avoid long-term pain. So go ahead and put that in the comments down below. I'll see you there.